Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, with the name of the merciful God. So my name is Usama, and I'm a senior researcher at the Quilliam Foundation. And I'd like to thank the Young European Movement for partnering with us in this event. So the short answer to that question, extremism in Europe, what can the EU do? The short answer is a lot more, of course. But before I talk about the three specific questions, which is in another phase, I'd just like to give some background in terms of a lot of this is to do with Islam in Europe, clearly. And I'm speaking as a Western Muslim, like tens of millions of us, in fact, whose first home and first language is a European language, English in my case, and London as my home. Now, the issue of dealing with Islam and Muslim communities, or the place of Islam and religion and faith in general, and Muslim communities in Europe, I think is central to this whole issue. And we mustn't lose sight of that. So, for example, Islam is often presented as the other in Europe, and the rise of right-wing, sometimes explicitly anti-Islamic parties across Europe that Charles has referred to is an example of that. But Muslims often see it very differently. Muslims point out that Islam reached Europe in the 7th century, taking most of Spain, the Iberian Peninsula, and reaching the south of France, of course, and ruling there for a few years. And of course remained in the Iberian Peninsula for 7 or 8 centuries and built some of the greatest architectural landmarks and gardens, and contributed to the civilization of the Iberian Peninsula. Later, coming from the east, the Balkans and the Ottoman Empire, of course, there was another 500 or 600 years of Islamic presence via the Ottoman Empire, and of course you have tens of millions of Muslims in Russia, Bulgaria, and places like that. So in the Muslim psyche, especially the tens of Muslims in Europe, struggling with these issues also about their place in Europe, there is a strong sense that we're not outsiders, we're not the other. We are rooted there. We have strong roots also, perhaps not quite as strong as, say, Christianity, but certainly very strong roots. And we wish to be part of a modern pluralistic Europe. And in fact, we often point to the brighter sides of our history, because every nation or people has a dark side and a bright side to its history. So of course there were dark days of the Andalusian experience and of the Ottoman experience, but there were also very bright aspects to it as well. And one of those was the religious pluralism and the immense flourishing of Muslim civilization in partnership with Christian, Jewish, and other streams, if you like. And related to that, though, is of course interpretations of Islam and of religions in general, because part of this is how does faith fit into Western Europe, or into modern Europe, which is increasingly quite secular and quite anti-religion, unlike the US. And that's where we have the problem of extremist interpretation of Islam. So while it is absolutely correct, as Emily said, to point out EU foreign policy mistakes, or Western foreign policy mistakes, which do make problems of extremism worse, it's also important to understand the Islamist psyche and the internal dynamics of the of Muslim extremism, which, like other forms of religious extremism, has a strong sense of religious fanaticism to it, unreal grievances or disconnected, skewed grievances, if you like, from the past, which means that they would attack Europe and the West no matter what, actually, whether there were foreign policy mistakes in Syria or not. However, having said that, there are some legitimate grievances there. For example, the vast majority of the Muslim majority world, and almost the whole of Africa, for example, was colonized by Western European Christian powers between the 17th and 20th centuries. And that still has left its legacy on many of those countries. They were only 50, 60, 70 years out of the colonial period with independence. So there are a lot of issues there, but I think the majority of Muslims, like any other people around the world, actually want to live in peace with others and want to find common ground and understanding. But we often have a lot of work to do is to find and spell out explicitly that common ground, and how civilizations and religions can share values, for example, in order to build that kind of common future.
Good evening, my name's